In the scorching deserts and rugged mountains of the American Southwest, a people once moved like shadows, fierce, proud, and unbreakable. They were the Apache. To their enemies, they were ghosts in the night, masters of the land who could vanish without a trace. To their own people, they were defenders, guardians of freedom and spirit. This is not just a story of war. It's the story of survival, of a people whose courage, resilience, and relentless spirit made them legends. Today, we travel back through centuries to uncover the lives, the culture, and the fearless hearts of the Apache warriors, a people who refused to surrender. Long before the arrival of European settlers, before the first Spanish horses thundered across the plains, the Apache people roamed the deserts, mountains, and forests of what we now call Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, and northern Mexico. The land was harsh, scorching sun by day, freezing winds by night. Yet, in these unforgiving landscapes, the Apache thrived. They called themselves Ndi, meaning the people. Their world was shaped by nature, the high desert mesas, the rugged Sierra Madre, the red rocks of Arizona. Every canyon held a story, every mountain a spirit. The Apache lived in small, mobile groups, able to move swiftly to follow game or evade enemies. They built wickiups, dome-shaped shelters of brush and grass. Simple, temporary, and perfectly adapted to their nomadic life. Unlike the agricultural societies of Pueblo or the Hopi, the Apache were hunters, gatherers, and warriors. Their world was built on adaptability. From childhood, Apache boys learned to endure hunger, pain, and fatigue. Girls learned to gather wild foods, to tan hides, to preserve the culture, and to teach the songs of their ancestors. They were not a single tribe, but a nation of bands: Chiricahua, Mescalero, Jicarilla, Lipan, Western Apache, and others, each with its own leaders, dialects, and lands. Yet they shared a common bond: the Apache way, courage, loyalty, and independence. Their enemies feared them for their mastery of guerrilla tactics, their uncanny ability to disappear into the landscape, and their willingness to fight to the death for their land and freedom. But to truly understand the Apache warrior, we must first understand their spirit, their deep connection to the earth and the code that guided their lives. To the Apache, the land was alive. Every rock, river, and mountain carried spiritual power. They believed in Usan, the creator, and in countless spirits who shaped the world and guided human life. From birth, an Apache child was taught respect for nature, for elders, and for courage. Strength was not only physical, it was spiritual. The Apache code of life was clear: protect your family, honor your word, never show fear, die with dignity. Cowardice was the greatest shame. Bravery, even in death, was the path to honor. Warriors were trained not just for battle, but for endurance. They could run for miles across burning desert without water. They could survive days without food. They learned to track enemies through the faintest signs: a broken twig, a disturbed stone, a footprint half covered by dust. To outsiders, they seemed supernatural. To the Apache, they were simply living in harmony with the land that had shaped them for generations. When war came, it was not for conquest. It was for defense, for survival, for vengeance when wrongs were done. The Apache were feared, but they did not fight for domination. They fought for freedom. The first outsiders the Apache encountered were the Spanish in the 1500s. The Spanish brought horses, guns, and disease, but also the spark of a centuries-long struggle. At first, the Apache raided Spanish settlements for livestock and supplies. To them, these were not acts of cruelty but of necessity, a way to survive as the newcomers occupied their hunting grounds. The Spanish, in turn, called them Apaches de Guerra, the warlike people. For more than 200 years, the Apache clashed with Spanish and later Mexican forces. They became known as expert horsemen, turning the Spanish gift of the horse into a weapon of unmatched mobility. They struck swiftly and disappeared, melting into the wilderness. Even Spanish soldiers, trained in European warfare, found themselves helpless against this invisible enemy. When the United States took control of the Southwest after the Mexican-American War in 1848, the Apache hoped for peace. But new settlers brought fences, forts, and mines, slicing into sacred Apache lands. Once again, war came, this time against the U.S. Army. The mid-1800s were the age of the great Apache war chiefs. names that would echo through history. Cochise, Victorio, Mangas Coloradas, and Geronimo. Each was a symbol of resistance, intelligence, and unyielding courage. Cochise, the proud leader of the Chiricahua, sought peace with the Americans until betrayal tore it apart. In 1861, a U.S. officer falsely accused him of kidnapping a boy. When Cochise came to negotiate, he was seized. He escaped, but his family and warriors were killed. From that moment, Cochise swore vengeance. For a decade, he waged war across the mountains of Arizona, striking wagon trains, forts, and settlements. His warriors knew every canyon, every pass, and the U.S. Army could never catch him. Victorio, of the Warm Springs Apache, was another legend, a leader of fierce discipline and deep compassion. He fought to protect his people from being forced onto barren reservations. When soldiers tried to confine them, he led his band across deserts and mountains, fighting impossible odds. And then there was Mangas Coloradas, the towering chief who united multiple Apache bands against the invaders. Tall, intelligent, and strategic, he fought both Mexicans and Americans. But his death, captured, tortured, and executed while under a flag of truce, became a rallying cry for vengeance. And out of that fire rose Geronimo. Born Goyle, meaning the one who yawns, Geronimo's name would soon strike fear across the Southwest. He was not a chief by birth, but warrior of unmatched courage and cunning. His story began in blood. In 1851, while trading in Mexico, his mother, wife, and 3 children were murdered by Mexican soldiers. Grief turned to fire. From that moment, Geronimo swore eternal revenge. He became a master of guerrilla warfare, leading lightning raids across hundreds of miles, eluding pursuers time and again. Soldiers said he could sense danger before it came, vanish into thin air, and fight like a spirit of the mountains. For decades, Geronimo and his followers resisted both Mexican and American armies, often numbering only a few dozen warriors against thousands. His name became legend, whispered by settlers in fear, and spoken with pride among his people. But even legends grow weary. By the 1880s, the Apache Wars were drawing to a close. The U.S. government had forced most Apache bands onto reservations, barren, foreign places far from their ancestral lands. Geronimo, restless and defiant, escaped again and again, but the noose tightened. In 1886, surrounded in the Sierra Madre Mountains, Geronimo finally surrendered to General Nelson Miles. He was the last Apache leader to lay down his arms, ending over 2 centuries of resistance. As he handed over his rifle, he is said to look the general in the eye and said, "I should have never surrendered. I should have fought until I was the last man alive." Even in defeat, Geronimo's spirit remained unbroken. What made the Apache so formidable was not just skill or weapons. It was their way of life. Apache warfare was rooted in knowledge of the land. They used the terrain as their greatest ally. They moved silently, communicated with hand signals, and could travel by night guided only by the stars. Every warrior was trained in endurance. An Apache fighter could run 50 miles without rest. They carried little food, surviving on wild plants or raw meat if necessary. Their weapons were simple: bows, lances, rifles captured from enemies, but their tactics were sophisticated. They attacked supply lines, ambushed troops, and vanished before reinforcements could arrive. To the U.S. Army, who fought with heavy wagons and rigid formations, the Apaches seemed like phantoms. They fought not in open battle, but through cunning, patience, and surprise, the first masters of what we now call guerrilla warfare. But even beyond war, the Apache were defined by honor. They believed that courage was sacred, that fear was an illusion to be conquered. When a warrior fell in battle, his death was not a tragedy, but a transformation, returning his spirit to the mountains and sky he defended. Behind every warrior stood the strength of Apache women. They were the keepers of tradition, the backbone of family, and often fighters themselves. Women gathered food, built shelters, and cared for the children, but they also held power. In some bands, women served as spiritual leaders, healers, and even warriors. One of the most remarkable was Lozin, the sister of Victorio. She was said to have the gift of foresight, to sense the direction of enemies in her mind. Victorio once said, Lozin is my right hand and my left. She is braver than most men. She fought beside her brother in battle after battle, helping warriors escape encirclement and guiding them through impossible terrain. Lozin's story is a reminder that the Apache spirit of courage knew no boundaries of gender, only a heart. After Geronimo's final surrender in 1886, the remaining Apache warriors, including women and children, were taken as prisoners of war. They were shipped thousands of miles away, first to Florida, then Alabama, and finally to Oklahoma. For nearly 30 years, they lived as captives, even those who had never fought against the United States. Geronimo spent his final years as a prisoner at Fort Sill, Oklahoma. He became a celebrity of sorts, appearing in fairs and parades, but always under guard. In 1909, at age 79, Geronimo died after being thrown from his horse. His last words were said to be, "I should have never surrendered. I should have fought until I was the last man alive." With his death, an era ended, but the Apache spirit endured. Today, the Apache people live across the American Southwest. In Arizona, New Mexico, and Oklahoma, their communities preserve ancient traditions while embracing modern life. They continue to honor the old ways through songs, dances, and ceremonies that connect them to their ancestors. The Apache language, once banned in schools, is now being revived by new generations. Elders teach the youth not only the words, but the meanings, the songs that once carried warriors into battle and comforted them in loss. Their legacy has left a mark far beyond their own lands. The word Apache has come to symbolize courage, adaptability, and defiance. Helicopters, software, even sports teams carry the name, but few truly understand the people behind it. To the Apache, freedom was not an idea, it was life itself. They fought not for conquest, but for the right to live by their own ways, on their own land, under their own sky. The Apache Wars may have ended more than a century ago, but the spirit of the warriors remains alive. Their courage, their resilience, and their deep respect for the land continue to inspire people around the world. In every Apache community today, the stories of Geronimo, Cochise, Victorio, and Lozin are told, not as tales of violence, but as lessons of endurance and pride. They remind us that even in the face of overwhelming odds, the human spirit can remain unbroken. Listen closely, and you might still hear it. The whisper of the wind across the desert, the soft thunder of hooves on dry earth. The Apache are still here. Their blood runs to the land they once defended. Their songs rise with the morning sun, and their spirit rides the mountains forever. They were called savages by those who did not understand them. But in truth, they were guardians, warriors of freedom, of family, of faith in the earth itself. The world remembers them as fierce, relentless, untamed. But the Apache were more than warriors. They were people of vision, lovers of the land, poets of survival, teachers of endurance. And though their weapons are silent now, their legacy speaks louder than ever, because courage never dies, and the fearless warriors of the Apache tribe will forever ride the winds of history. If this story moved you, take a moment to keep their legacy alive. Like this video to honor the spirit of the Apache. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories from history that deserve to be remembered. And share this video with someone who believes that courage, freedom, and resilience are the true marks of greatness. The story of the Apache does not end here. It continues with us.